From the beginning, the research aircraft program was a cooperative affair. The National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, predecessor to NASA, the aircraft industry, the Air Force, the Navy, working together. Their first effort was directed at breaking the sound barrier. And the aircraft that would do it was the X-1, designed to acquire flight data at the speed of sound.
Among the greatest of aircraft are planes that made history. The first plane to fly, the first plane to fly around the world, the first plane to carry a passenger, and the first plane to break the sound barrier. The sound barrier is also referred to as Mach 1. It is named after Ernst Mach, who photographed objects moving faster than the speed of sound. To break this barrier, a plane must fly faster than 770 miles per hour, or 1,239 kilometers per hour. Bell Industries is a plane company, and they thought of the sound barrier as a challenge. They had to be the first to break it, to fly faster than sound, and to secure themselves a spot in history. So they made planes, and after many tests in planes, they finally created the Bell X-1.
The Bell X-1 was an experimental aircraft. The goal of the Bell X-1 was to try and break the sound barrier.
The Bell X-1, piloted by Chuck Yeager, in collaboration with Bell Industries, broke the sound barrier in October 1947, changing the way we looked at flight forever by setting the bar for new flight tech and proving that man could fly faster than the speed of sound. Today, the Bell X-1 inspired us to create the new U.S. space program, as well as X-craft projects like the X-1E. Charles Chuck Yeager was not the first to pilot the Bell X-1. One pilot died, one wanted way too much money to test fly, and several others couldn't push the plane to its limits. Yeager was the best pilot for the job because he understood how to push the plane and was able to push past his own barriers. Yeager was born to Susie and Albert Yeager in 1923. As a child, he was a competitive kid. He tried to do his best. He graduated high school in 1941. He enlisted as a private in the U.S. Army Air Forces on September 12th. At enlistment, Yeager was not eligible for flight training because of his age and educational background, but the entry of the U.S. into World War II less than 3 months later prompted the USAAF to alter its recruiting rules. Having unusually sharp vision, Yeager displayed natural talent as a pilot and was accepted for flight training. Yeager received his wings and a promotion to flight officer at Luke Field, Arizona, where he graduated on March 10, 1943. Assigned to the 357th Fighter Group at Tonopah, Nevada, he initially trained as a fighter pilot, flying Bell P-39 Air Cobras and ships overseas with the group on November 23, 1943. Stationed in the United Kingdom at RAF Leiston, Yeager flew P-51 Mustangs in combat with the 363rd Fighter Squadron. He named his first combat aircraft Glamorous Glenn after his girlfriend Glenys Faye Dickhouse, who became his wife in February 1945. Yeager would later go on to name the Bell X-1 the Glamorous Glenys as well. Yeager was only one of the people to earn ace in a day for destroying 5 enemy fighter planes in one flight. Yeager remained in the Air Force after the war, becoming a test pilot at Muroc Army Airfield following graduation from Air Materiel Command Flight Performance School. After earlier pilots had been dismissed, the USAAF selected Yeager to fly the Bell X-1 in a program to research high-speed flight. Yeager made progress. He was cunning, determined, and he wanted to create history. Because no jet engine at the time was powerful enough, the Bell X-1 used a 4-chamber XLR-11 rocket engine that produced 26,500 newtons, or 6,000 pounds of static thrust. The X-1 was powered by a Reaction Motors XLR-11 RM3 rocket engine. Its 4 chambers each produced 1,500 pounds of thrust. At full power, the engine burned up its 600-gallon supply of liquid oxygen and alcohol fuel in less than 3 minutes. Because of its limited endurance, the X-1 had to be lifted to an altitude of 25,000 feet under the belly of a converted B-29 bomber. The B-29 was used because it was the only plane capable of lifting the fully fueled X-1. It then dropped free and fired its rocket engine. After running out of fuel, the X-1 would glide down for a precise landing on Muroc Dry Lake. The advantages of swept wings for supersonic flight were as yet unknown, so the X-1 had straight, very thin wings.
The designs of the wings, if you looked at the X-1 wing specifically, it was designed as a straight wing, slim wing. When you look at that model today, it's not a very efficient wing. It doesn't work very well, especially at high-speed travel. The swept wing is much more efficient and can handle the pressures a lot better.
The shape of its fuselage was modeled after a .50 caliber machine gun bullet. To maintain its bullet shape, the X-1's cockpit canopy was flush with the fuselage, which severely limited sight. An unusual design feature of the X-1 was its all-moving horizontal tail, which could be adjusted up and down or trimmed. This turned out to be critical when Yeager found that the X-1's elevator control became useless above Mach 0.94. The trimmable tail served as an impromptu backup pitch control as the X-1 flew through the sound barrier. The X-1 was also painted orange, which happens to be Yeager's favorite color. Before the historic flight of the Bell X-1, Yeager was riding his horse, and it slammed into a gate. He broke 2 ribs. He knew this would complicate climbing the ladder to get into the Bell X-1, but he didn't want to disappoint his family, his company, or the world, so he lied about his injury. During the flight, he climbed into the cockpit and used a broom handle to close the hatch. On October 14, 1947, the Boeing B-29 took flight. The Bell X-1 was then dropped and it ignited its first rocket engine. Yeager was determined to break the barrier. The second rocket engine was ignited. Yeager thought of his family. The third. Yeager noticed that speedometer was on the fritz. He tapped it. The fourth engine was ignited. The speedometer was back on the fritz. Yeager radioed headquarters. He told them that his speedometer was on the fritz. They told him they didn't know what was happening to it. Suddenly, a radio station broke the conversation to tell Yeager important information. When you break the sound barrier, it makes a sound. It makes a sonic boom. A sonic boom is a sound caused by shock waves created by the object moving faster than the speed of sound. When a plane moves through the air, it creates pressure waves. At high speeds, these pressure waves are moving so fast they can't get out of the way of each other. They build up and get compressed together, and eventually they become a single shock wave at the speed of sound. When a plane moves through the sound barrier, as long as the plane is in the barrier, it makes a sonic boom. So anyone under the plane at the time hears the boom, but because the plane is moving so fast, you only hear a bit of the boom before it moves out of earshot. If you were able to move with the plane on the ground, you would hear a continuous sonic boom. The people in the plane don't hear the boom, though. The boom follows the plane, so it never gets to the cockpit where the people are. Think of it like the wake of a boat. The wake never gets to the front of the boat, it just unfolds behind the boat. The sound is the wake, it just unfolds behind the plane, never actually getting to the cockpit. So therefore, everyone in Muroc or the Mojave Desert heard the sonic boom, but Yeager couldn't hear it. The station told Yeager that they had just heard a sonic boom. Yeager had done it. He had broken the ever-resistant sound barrier. He had made history. History books and science books everywhere would speak of him. The newspapers would mention him. Documentaries everywhere would speak of this great feat. The Bell X-1 would then go on to fly 78 times. The Bell X-1 is now in the National Smithsonian Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C. Planes would continue to break this barrier many times, but the Bell X-1 is the first. The sound barrier would teach everyone that nothing is impossible with the right mindset. The information recovered by the Bell X-1 helped NASA get people to space in more fuel-efficient rockets. The data also proved useful for helping with stability and control, wing and tail loading, high-altitude flight, and pilot familiarization.
We learned a lot about aerodynamics, thermodynamics, fluid dynamics. We designed aircraft differently to operate within the subsonic flight regime and push the envelope closer to Mach Tuck and supersonic travel. And we were able to come up with a lot of those designs due to failures that occurred during the X-1 process. We learned wing design wasn't the most efficient for what they were trying to accomplish. Tail design wasn't quite the most efficient. And they could tweak things from there, and as they did through the X-1 all the way up, I think it was to the X-15, I think was the latest.
Bell Industries proved barriers big and small are nothing more than a suggestion. With the right mindset, anything is possible. Even breaking barriers as big as the sound barrier or as small as your greatest desires. Making history doesn't take a lot, but just you and the barrier.